So my name is Melissa Moses, and I'm a research coordinator for the MODES study through the UBC Sexual Health Lab and the BC Centre for Sexual Medicine. And I'm just going to run through with you the materials and procedures associated with your MODES hormone sampling kit. Just a reminder of what we're asking you for. We're asking you to collect saliva samples, fingernail clippings, and toenail clippings. And all of your saliva samples will need to be collected over the course of 3 typical days. Typical meaning that you're not on your period, you're not experiencing any unusual stress, and you're not currently sick. The reason that we ask you to collect on a typical day is because what we're hoping to capture from your samples is just a baseline understanding of where your hormones are at on a very average, very typical day without any interference from hormone fluctuations, stress, or illness. Inside your kit, you're going to find 3 different day packages to keep you organized. As you can see, there's day 1, day 2, and day 3, with all the vials that you'll need to collect your saliva samples on each of those days. You're also going to find 2 small little plastic bags, and that's where you're going to store your fingernail clippings and your toenail clippings. All of your saliva samples, we're going to ask you to please store those in your home freezer, not the fridge. As for your fingernail and toenail samples, those will not need to be stored in the freezer, but most women just keep everything together to keep everything organized and simple. Inside your kit, you're going to find 3 different documents that are color-coded. The most important document is going to be your green log sheet. That's where you'll record information about your saliva samples. The white set of information is instructions, so you can forget everything I'm about to tell you. It's all written down inside your kit. And the yellow sheet here is an optional checklist. You do not have to use it, but if you are someone that likes to be quite organized, it's there to help you as we move along through each step. So when it comes time to collect your saliva samples, as I mentioned earlier, we ask you to collect on a typical day. What you'll need to do is to collect 4 samples throughout the day. So one thing that I'll clarify right away is that one saliva sample consists of spitting into 2 different vials. One vial will be clear and one vial will be yellow. And you'll notice that they all have unique markings on each vial. So, for example, your first sample of day 1 would be marked with a 1-1, meaning 1 for the day and 1 for your first time point. Your second time point of day 1 would then look like 1-2, meaning day 1, time 2 sample. And if you refer to your green log sheet, you'll see here that we ask you to write down what time you started collecting each sample and also what time you finished. And the reason that we ask you to do that is because there's often a lot of questions around when the exact times are that you'll need to collect. Now, your first 3 samples of each day must be collected within an hour of waking up. So what that looks like is, let's imagine you wake up at 7 o'clock in the morning. Your first sample we need you to collect immediately upon waking up. And then your second sample, we would need you to collect that exactly 30 minutes after you've woken up. And your third sample would be collected exactly an hour after you've woken up. We do ask you for that whole hour to refrain from eating, drinking, or brushing your teeth until the hour is over and you've collected your first 3 samples. Questions that I'm often asked are things like, is it okay if I sleep in before I go ahead and collect that first sample? The answer, unfortunately, is that we need you to wake up immediately and collect that first sample. And the other questions I often get asked are, should I collect my second and third sample at 30 minutes after waking up, or perhaps 30 minutes after I finish collecting my first sample? You want to time your samples based on your wake-up time. So let's imagine for your first sample in the morning at 7 o'clock, your mouth is quite dry, and you find it's actually taking quite a long time to collect. Don't collect 30 minutes after you finish that first collection. Make sure it's 30 minutes after you've woken up. I know that we've covered the first 3 samples of each day. I just want to quickly cover with you the last sample that we're asking you to collect on each day, and that's your bedtime sample. What we need you to do is to collect that final sample just before you go to sleep in the evening. You want to ensure that you ate dinner at least 2 hours before, and make sure to brush your teeth after you've collected that final sample. The reason we ask you to refrain from brushing your teeth beforehand is because we'd like to avoid any microbleeding that might interfere with your hormone sample. I'll bring your attention to the last column here on your green log sheet. Then it's labeled cold water rinse, yes or no. For your second, third, and fourth sample of each day, we're going to ask you to just rinse your mouth with some water very quickly. Just swish it around, spit it out, and then go ahead and spit into your vials. However, for your first sample of the day, don't bother with the rinse at all. Just go ahead, wake up, and spit right away. So I put a no here in the column to remind you not to bother with that first rinse. But for your second, third, and fourth samples of the day, do go ahead and make sure you do the rinse first. Other questions that I often get asked as well are how much saliva should I collect in my vial? You want to collect at least halfway to 3/4 of the way full. And if you get a lot of bubbles, just tap your vial on a hard surface and the bubbles should dissipate. And as I mentioned before, make sure that you store all of your saliva samples in your home freezer, not the fridge. You're also going to notice that there are 3 small straws inside your hormone testing kit. And these are just bubble tea straws. And the only reason that they're in your kit is because they fit perfectly inside the vials. So this way you don't have to aim and spit. You can just drool very carefully into your straw to avoid any mess. For your fingernail and toenail samples, we do ask you to collect samples from each digit. Just make sure that you remove any nail polish or coating that you might have on. And you don't need a lot of nail clipping from each digit. As long as there's something, that's just fine. And just make sure to keep your fingernail clippings separate from your toenail clippings. And you do not have to collect them on the same day. As long as you're collecting your fingernail and toenail clippings within the same month, that's perfectly all right.